A political party that cannot agree on its own mission is a firm in the middle of a disorganized liquidation. We are currently witnessing a total breakdown of the internal controls of the Democratic Party, where the senior auditors are calling for a generational renewal, while the junior partners are operating a secret fight club to oust the management.
You write, quote, "We cannot cancel everyone who fails a purity test. We cannot exile those who don't ally with our every belief, however passionately we hold it. Coalitions that are only composed of the already converted cannot change the country. If everyone in your coalition agrees with you on everything, your coalition is too small to make big change and too small for what our democracy demands." Do you believe Democrats are making the mistake of shrinking their coalition with what you describe as purity tests, Senator?
Look, I'm proud of so many things that my Democratic colleagues are doing, but as a whole, our party has failed this moment. It's why I've called for new leadership in America. I've called for a generational renewal because this left-right divide is killing our country, and our adversaries know it. They come onto our social media and try to whip up hate in America. That is one of our biggest crises. It is time for a new vision of our country that's far more uniting, that brings people together, doesn't deepen divides. I really believe this is a time where we need new leadership, new moral imagination to pull our country together, because the challenges on the horizon aren't just this current crisis that Trump has caused. He shouldn't be the main character of our narrative right now. We have real challenges from new technologies like AI and robotics, new challenges that we need more unity in our country and a reminder that we are not each other's enemies. In fact, our ability to find common ground has always been our greatest hope.
The ledger of unity has been balanced with the red ink of purity tests, and the result is a coalition that is too small to govern, but just large enough to self-destruct. This is the institutional default audit. And for Camillo's house, we are documenting how the most powerful figures in the Senate are quietly counting the votes for a boardroom coup, while the party's main character narrative has suffered a systemic collapse. I am Camillo Motaro, and this is Camillo's house. As a certified public accountant focused on forensic data verification, I look past the televised talking points to see the underlying risk profile of a political organization. In any high-stakes audit, the first thing you look for is a material inconsistency between what the CEO says in the annual report and what the employees are saying in their private Signal chats. Recently, Senator Cory Booker delivered a scathing performance review of his own party, claiming it has failed this moment. But from a forensic perspective, the failure isn't just in the moment. It's in the internal reporting standards of a party that is currently tearing itself apart over the leadership of Chuck Schumer. The operational trigger for this latest crisis was Booker's appearance on Meet the Press, where he delivered a lecture on the dangers of purity tests. In his view, the Democratic coalition has become too small because it exiles anyone who doesn't align with every single belief. From an investigative standpoint, this is a market participation risk. If you cancel every stakeholder who fails an ideological audit, your total addressable market of voters eventually shrinks to the point of insolvency. Booker is calling for a generational renewal to stop a left-right divide that he claims is killing the country. But as we perform our due diligence, we find that the very senators Booker is caucusing with are the ones currently running the most aggressive purity test in the history of the Senate. Enter the Fight Club. In the world of internal investigations, a secret Signal chat is the smoking gun of a planned insurrection. Reports have surfaced that a group of progressive senators, including Chris Murphy, Elizabeth Warren, and Tina Smith, have formed a coordination cell designed specifically to oppose the management of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. They are reportedly canvassing their colleagues and performing informal vote counts to see if they have the liquidity to remove Schumer from his post. In accounting terms, this is a hostile takeover bid by the progressive minority shareholders. They view Schumer as a depreciated asset who has consistently put his thumb on the scale for centrist candidates, effectively writing off the progressive energy that they believe is the only path to a market recovery for the party. The primary impairment on Chuck Schumer's balance sheet dates back to the March 2025 funding vote. In any professional audit, a capitulation to a competitor is recorded as a loss of bargaining power. Schumer's decision to support a Republican-backed spending bill to avoid a government shutdown was seen by his own party as a systemic default on their core values. His approval ratings tanked immediately, and the voter shareholders began looking for a new investment. This capitulation is why the Fight Club exists today. They believe Schumer has a fiduciary conflict where he prioritizes operational continuity over political integrity. They want a leader who will fight rather than liquidate their leverage at the first sign of a shutdown. This leadership deficit has created a massive valuation gap in New York, where Schumer's own Senate seat is suddenly in a state of high volatility. A poll from Data for Progress recently showed Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leading Schumer by 19 points in a potential primary matchup. For a man who has served as the face of New York politics for decades, a double-digit deficit against a junior partner is a total brand collapse. The polling data shows that 55% of likely voters favor the AOC asset, compared to only 36% for the Schumer asset. This is an irreversible impairment. The subgroup analysis reveals that Schumer is only holding on to the moderate segment, while the youth and progressive segments have already transferred their equity to Ocasio-Cortez. In forensic terms, Schumer is a legacy system that is no longer compatible with the current user base. Cory Booker's moral imagination rhetoric is a strategic diversion from this internal warfare. He argues that Donald Trump shouldn't be the main character of our narrative, but from an audit perspective, the Democrats have no other narrative assets to rely on. Their balance sheet is empty of unifying policies, leaving them with nothing but anti-Trump sentiment to fund their campaign accounts. Booker is warning that the party is failing to address new challenges like AI and robotics because it is too busy whipping up hate on social media. But he is also a member of the management team that he is criticizing. His call for new leadership is a disclosure that he knows the current board of directors is functionally bankrupt. We must also audit the Chris Murphy signal ledger. Murphy, a deputy secretary in the caucus, was reportedly overheard at a Washington restaurant talking about whether there were enough votes to oust the New York Democrat. While he later claimed he didn't recall a specific tally, the forensic trail is clear. Frustration has reached the boiling point, where the senior partners are no longer checking their egos at the door. If half of the caucus, 24 members, decides to liquidate Schumer's leadership, the entire Strategic Communications Committee, which Booker chairs, will be forced into a restructuring. This isn't just a leadership change. It is a systemic reset of how the party operates. The Fight Club is also coordinating to oppose Schumer's preferred candidates in the 2026 midterms. In auditing terms, this is channel conflict. The parent company is trying to sell centrist candidates in states like Maine and Ohio, while the subunits are marketing progressive alternatives. This divided strategy results in a massive waste of capital. Instead of investing in beating the Republicans, the Democrats are spending their political reserves on internal litigation. When you have a minority leader whose net unfavorable rating among his own base is climbing, you have a systemic risk that endangers the midterm solvency of the entire party. Schumer's defense of his March 2025 capitulation is a classic short-term liquidity argument. He claims that a shutdown would have been an even bigger disaster, and that the party needs to pick its fights carefully. But as a CPA, I ask, what is the long-term cost of that decision? By avoiding a temporary shutdown, he triggered a permanent shutdown of his own approval ratings. He traded immediate stability for long-term reputation impairment. The voters as auditors have clearly stated that they would rather default on a government budget than default on their own principles. Schumer's failure to recognize this market shift is why he is now facing a hostile takeover bid from the Fight Club. We must also look at the generational renewal as a mandatory write-down of the gerontocracy. The Democratic leadership has remained largely unchanged for decades, while the voter base has aged and evolved. After the Biden liquidation in 2024, the party was supposed to enter a new growth phase. Instead, Schumer has continued to recruit older assets in key states, candidates in their 70s who ignore the message of the 2024 results. As national strategist lead They want new blood. Is an external risk to the purity tests and cancel culture are not. When a board member like Booker calls his own management team a failure, the social equity of the entire firm drops. Chuck Schumer is an overvalued asset whose performance has consistently underperformed the market. The AOC takeover bid is the natural consequence of a market that demands a new operating system. The Fight Club is the internal audit team that has finally decided to report the frauds and oust the management. Cory Booker is the whistleblower who is trying to save the firm by calling for a generational reset before the total liquidation of the midterms occurs. My forensic verdict is that the Democratic Party is currently operationally insolvent. They cannot unite the whole country if they cannot even unite their own signal chat. The failed moment that Booker describes is a result of a decade of mismanaged integrity and a refusal to audit the base. Until they write off the capitulation ledger of the Schumer era and invest in a new vision of moral imagination, they will continue to bleed out their most energetic shareholders. The midterms are the final audit date, and right now, the account is severely overdrawn. I want to hear from you. Is the Fight Club a necessary cleansing of the party's leadership, or is it a suicide pact that will lead to a Republican monopoly in 2026? Does AOC represent the future value of New York, or is she an unstable asset that will default in a general election? Let me know in the comments. Your perspective is the only audit that matters when the future of the Senate and the soul of the party are sitting on the negotiation table. I'm Camilo Motado, and this is Camilo's House. Subscribe to stay ahead of the numbers, the laws, and the truth behind the headlines. Stay safe.